We're now on Daf Samach Aleph Amid Beis, Omer Rabbi Yochanan, and the Gemara is going to now offer Rabbi Yochanan's explanation to the Machlok Shin Rabbi Meir on the one hand and Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon on the other. Asham Mitzora Sheshchato Shalol Lishmo. If let's say the carbon Asham, which the Mitzora is required to bring as one of his karbanos of Tahara, and it was shechted Shalol L'Shem Karban Asham, and the Mishnah at the beginning of Zvachim says that in a case where you shechted the animal Shalol L'Shma, the carbon is kosher, but it's Eino Ol L'Bayim L'Shem Chova. Banu L'Machlokes Rabbi Meir on the one hand and Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon on the other hand, which is the case where Dam was nishpach in the middle of the hazolts of Yom Kippurim, or as we saw earlier on Amud Aleph, the log shemen of the mitzvah was nishpach in the middle of the matanos. The Rabbi Meir, Diyomar Yovi Acher V'Yaskil B'Tchila, every avod that was incomplete is kamicha eno. It's nothing, and you have to start from scratch. It's hachinami here too. In the case of Nasham Mitzora, there was shechted Shalol L'Shma, Yovi, the mitzvah has to bring Asham Acher, replacement Asham, V'Yishchot, and he has to go back and begin the entire process again. And since the first shechit of the first Asham was not done properly, it's Kamicha Eino. And it wasn't Ol L'Bayim L'Shem Chova. And even if the Kohen had already done the Dama Asham on the Bahonis of the Mitzorah, it doesn't mean anything because the Shechita with Shalol L'Shma. But Rav Elazar, Rav Shimon, Sha'omrim, because they say with regard to Nishpach Adam or Nishpach Hashemen, is Mimakum Sheposag Mishomu Maschil, is Hacha, here they would agree, Ein Lo Takana. The Mitzorah has no possibility of being Mitayr himself, to allow himself, as any Mechutza Kapara would be, to eat Kodshim, and he cannot bring another Asham to be mashlim as avoda, because the Torah says keves echad asham. He's only allowed to bring one keves for an asham and not two, and he can't go back to the beginning of the seder of the avoda because the original carbon was not batel. So he's in a real predicament. He's in a bind, and there doesn't seem to be any way out of that bind. Now, the asham mitzora is ma'akev achilas kodshim, because the Tara depends on the Nesinas Domim on Bahonos HaMitzora. That is Rashi Shita Masechet Pesachim Nuntes. Now, this whole Gemara that we learned, we're going to explain like Rashi, based on the gears of the Gemara that we have. But Tosis, Dibra Maskil Osham, on the top here of Samachem and Beis, says, how could Rabbi Yochanan compare the Machlokes Tanoim in the case of Nishpach Adam or Nishpach Hashemen to the din of Asham Mitzor Sheshachto Shalol L'Shma? In the case of Nishpach Adam or Hashemen, the carbon was perfect up until this point. And therefore, when he brings the Dam or the Shemen to replace the original one, he has a problem with Shtei Chatos or Shnei Lugim. But in the case of an Asham Shenichchat Shalol L'Shma, where lo also Tchil L'Bayim L'Shem Chova, therefore there was no situation of a Schila Akrova Klal. And therefore the din is that everybody should agree here in this case, he's allowed to bring another carbon. There's no chisaron of Asham Echad V'lo Shnayim. Let's go on in the Gemara. Maskiflei Rav Chizda argues against the presentation here of Rabbi Yochanan. He says, how can you tell me that, according to Rabbi Meir, the Mitzorah is allowed to bring another carbon for Otso Ksiv? The Pasuk says, V'lakacha kohenes hakeves, ha'echad, v'kriv Oso li'asham, v'yeslog Hashem v'nifosam, t'nufo l'fnei Hashem. The word Oso teaches me that he's chayav to be makriv that keves that had a tnufa beginning at its beginning with the Luga Shemen. you cannot bring another keves to replace that keves, because oso means oso liosham and not another keves liosham. So therefore, even according to Rabbi Meir, he has no takana for this mitzvah when there was a shechita liosham shalol lishma. And the Gemara answers kasha. Tanya Kavasi de Rabbi Yochanan. We have a brisa that seems to support Rabbi Yochanan that there is a Tana who holds that even in the case of shchitas ha'asham, the asham of mitzorah shalol lishma, nevertheless he brings a replacement asher, a korban asham li taharaso. In other words, that there is going to be a rachlokas here between Rabbi Yochanan and Rav Chizda about Rabbi Meir concerning the opinion of Rabbi Meir. What's the din in asham mitzorah that was shechted shalol lishma? Can he bring a replacement asher or not? And the Gemara now is going to bring a brisa that certainly clarifies that there is one Tana who holds that he can bring another Tana acher. And this Tana has to be Rabbi Meir. And it reflects the Shita Rabbi Yochanan in Rabbi Meir, because according to Rav Chizda, there is no such thing as a Tana in the case of Shchita Shalol Lishman and Osham that would allow you to bring a replacement Osham, because the Pasuk also only allows one Keves, the Keves that was Hunaf, Mitchilo with a Lug Shemen. Anya Kavasi, the Rabbi Yochanan, Hasham Mitzor Shishchalto, Shalol Lishma, oh, Shalol Nosan Domo, Bidomo Al Gabi Bahonos, Hareze Olo Gabi Mizbeach, Vitoun Nisachim, Vitzorich Osham Acher Lachshiro, which means the following: that if the Asham Mitzor was Shechted Shalol Lishma, or in a case where the dam was not placed on the bahonos of the mitzorah, the asham itself is still a korban kosher. It's all al gabi mizbech. It even requires nesachim. It has the status of an asham mitzorah. However, eina korban ol shem chova. He's going to have to bring an asham acher in order to be machshir him, meaning to be mitayr him, to kodshim. But we see clearly from this brisa that if the shchita, the asham shalol lishma, he has a takana and he can bring a korban acher, and that supports Rabbi Yochanan in his opinion of Rabbi Meir against Rav Chizda, who says that everybody agrees, it's unanimous that there is no takana. So what is Rav Chizda going to do with this brisa to be docha this brisa? Rav Chizda Omar lecha, he would say to you, what does the brisa mean when it says sarich? He has to bring another asham. Sarich the ein lo takana. It means that the mitzorah desperately needs a replacement asham in order to be matir to eat kodshim, but he doesn't have the license to do so because the Torah says also, and therefore ein lo takana. And the Gemara asks, "Vitani tana, is it? Can you find any language of any Mishnah or Brisa that tzarech, the word tzarech means be ein lo takana?" And the Gemara says, "Yes, I'll bring you such a case." Well, Sanya, and here's a raya from a Brisa, Nazir Memorat, meaning a Nazir who's already bald. He has no hair at all. And at the end of Malos Nizro, he's required to do Tiglachas of Nazir. As the Pasuk tells me in Parshas Baalot, it says Vigilach. I'm sorry, I think this is in Parsha, in Bamidbar. Oh no, Parshas Naso, sorry. I read the Vav as the Yud. So it's Bamidbar Vav. Vigilach HaNazir Pesach Ol Modes Rosh Nizro. And this Giluach is with a ta'ar. He needs a razor. And this is a Gemara in Masechet Nazir and Daf Nun Tesam and Beis. And at the time of Malos Yimei Nizro, up until that time, he's not allowed to put a tar on his rosh because the Torah says, "Kol Yimei Nizro tar lo yaval rosh." But now the Gilech HaNazir, with the Malos of Yimei Nizro, he has to be Megalech v'tar, but he's bald. Is Reish Shammai Omrim Tzorech Avoras Tar. Nevertheless, he requires to take a razor and move it over his head. He has no hair to cut. Beis Hillel Omrim Ein Tzorech Avoras Tar. I mean, he has no hair. Omer of Avina, what does Beit Shammai mean when they say Sarich? Sarich v'ein lo takana. He needs havaras tar, but he can't do so. He has no hair. So he has no takana liolam, which means that eno yochel liolam lishtos yayin. He becomes a nazir for the rest of his life because giluach nazir is critical and he cannot implement giluach nazir. Anyway, we see clearly from Rav Havina that when Beit Shammai used the word tzarich, what they mean is ein lo takana. So here too, Rav Chizkiah is going to interpret the word tzarich oshem acher as ein lo takana. Now the Gemara quotes another opinion that dissents and explains Beit Shammai that with regard to Nazim and Morat, it means something else. Pliga the Rabbi Pedos, Rabbi Avina, who says that Beit Shammai means Sarach v'ein lo takana, is against Rabbi Pedos. He understood that Beit Shammai holds Sarach v'yesh lo takana. The Amar Rabbi Pedos, Beit Shammai v'Rabbi Lozer Amru Davar Echad. Both agree to the following shita that if it's efshal l'kayim, if you cannot fulfill the pasuk as it's written in its literal translation, then you could be makayim it in a different way. And this is a machlokas tanoim in the Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin on Daf Mem Hayam at Beis. What's the din in a case where you cannot fulfill the words of the pasuk as they're written? Can you fulfill them in another alternative way? For example, a mitzvah doesn't have nebuch, a bow and yad or a bow and regel. Can we put the dam on the place where normally bahonos would be? Or should we say ein lo tahara olamis? He can never remove himself from the tuma state of mitzaras. Or for example, let's say Edim, in order to testify and condemn someone to death, they have to put the condemned that they testified against to death. They themselves have to be the ones. And what happens if nikta yada Edim? They cannot put him to death. Should we say that the nidon, who is condemned to death, is now potter, because we cannot fulfill the pasuk of yada Edim tia bo b'rishon alav miso? Or should we say no, it's not ma'akid if it cannot be fulfilled? Is Beit Shammai hadi amoron? This concept in the case of a mitzorah that is memorat, and Beit Shammai say all he needs is havaras taral roadshow, even though he's not being mekayim the pasuk of gilach hanazir, which applies also in mitzorah. And Rabbi Loza says that also in a case where we cannot fulfill the pasuk literally, nevertheless will suffice with some other method, as Beit Shammai said in regard to havaras tar al rosh, even though there's no gilua. Tisnan, we have a Mishnah 14th chapter in the Goyim with regard to Mitzorah, who requires matan dam or shemen and shemen on bahonos yado of raglo v'yimanim. If ein lem bo and yad, bo and regel, is ein lo taro lamis, according to the Tanakama of this Mishnah, there's no tara at all, because we cannot fulfill the pasuk to mikra kiksavo. But Rabbi Lozer Omer, no sein al makomo v'yote. All the Kohen has to do is put the dam of the shemen on the makom of the bohen, which is no longer there. There's no bohen, and yotza hamitzorah bazeh yidei chovasav v'nitar, because he holds, Rabbi Lozer, like Beit Shammai, that b'makom shei efshar l'kayim es ha-posuk kiksavo nitan l'kayimo b'yofen acher. Rabbi Shimon Omer im nosan al smol yotzi yidei chovaso, that even though the Torah requires matan dam or matan shemen al bo and yumanis, but if you put it on small, is yotzi yidei chovasa. And therefore, in this case, you don't have to fulfill the mitzvah and the mikra kiksavo, and therefore, if he puts it on his left hand, his left thumb, his left toe, yotzi yidei chovasa. So Rabbi Pidos indicates clearly that he understood Beit Shammai to hold that tzarich means tzarich vein lo takana, and that's against Rabbi Avina. Now, with regard to Kabbalah Saddam of the Hasham Mitzorah, we learned in a Brisa, the Torah says, "V'lakacha kohen midam ha'asham," and this means that the kohen takes or is makabel the dam of the behemoth for purposes of nesina al hamitzorah. And the Torah says v'lakach. Whenever it says v'lakach, it means a direct contact. Yachal b'kli. You might think that maybe it's enough if the kohen is makabel the dam of the asham in a utensil, in a receptacle. Just like in all karbanos, kabbalah sadam is in a kli and is in a mizrach. Amid lomar, therefore the Torah says, "V'nosan hakohen al tnuch ozen hamitar hayimonis," and we have now a hekesh between kabbalah sadam and sinas hadam al hamitzorah. And what does that teach me? Keshem shenesina nasis bi atzmo shel kohen. The nesina has to be with the finger of the kohen and not with the kli. Af lekicha, so to the kabbalah sadam from the tzavra behema has to be atzmo shel kohen. He's got to put his hands out and accept and receive the dam and then put it on the mitzorah, and no kli will be acceptable. Now, this is a little bit of a problem because in Chatos, the Torah says, "Vayikra dal v'lakacha kohen mitamo be'etzbo v'nosan al kranos hamizbeach," and there we don't say that just like the nesina, which is indicated in this pasuk nosan al kranos, requires the etzba of the kohen, so too the v'lakach and the Kabbalah requires the etzba shel kohen. So we don't know exactly when this hekesh of v'nosan and lakach excludes and disqualifies a kli. Let's go back to the brisa. Yachol, I might think that even the Kabbalah Saddam for the purpose of zrika, lamizbeach, it requires Kabbalah biyad and not the kli. That this carbon asham of mitzorah is so unique that the normal halach of Kabbalah Saddam B'Kli does not apply, and the requirement is Kabbalah Saddam Biyad, just like the Kabbalah of the Dam for the purpose of placing it on the Mitzorah requires Yad without a Kli, so too the Kabbalah Saddam for Zrik al Gabi Mizbeach requires Yad and not Kli. Talmud Lomar, Ki Kachatos Hasham Hu. What do we derive from this pasuk? There seems to be a hekesh between an asham and a chatos. Ma chatos te'una kli, af asham ta'un kli. So again, if not for this special hekesh, this derivation, we would have assumed that Kabbalah Saddam straight across the board in the case of an asham of a mitzorah requires yad hakohen and not a kli. But this hekesh to dam hachatos teaches me that dam ha'asham can and must be done with a kli. Nimtzei sata omer, the final summary says the brisa, asham mitzorah shnei kohanim mekamelis dama. We're going to need two different kabbalas on the part of two different kohanim. Echad biyad, one kohen will accept the dam in his hands. V'echad b'kli, zeh shekivel b'kli ba'alo etzel mizbeach. He does the zrika on the dam with the dam that he was received in the kli. V'zeh shekivel biyad ba'alo etzel mitzorah, and he puts the dam on the tnuch ozno hayimonis and bal yadav v'raglav hayimonis of the mitzorah. So we have two dinim of Kabbalah. One is biyad hakohen and one is b'kli. Tana Rabbanu, we brought to the brisa. Now we have machlokes tanoim about the kapara that's achieved in the case we have different parim. Let's say there was nishpach adam, you have to bring another par or another soyer. Is v'kulon, according to the first opinion of the Tanakama, all the parim or the seirim that he needs for the hazos Yom Kippurim in the case of nishpach adam ba'emtza, is metamim begodim. He who is osek in the sreifa has to be mitaris begodim in both, with regard to both the first par and the second par, or the first part and the second part of Nisrafim, and both parim or both seirim have to be burnt on Beis Hadeshin, meaning chutz l'shalosh machnos. And again, the Beis Hadeshin is a location out of the machne, and that's where they would, on a daily basis, take the deshin out when there was a hitstabrus of deshin on the mizbeach hachitzon, and the Torah says v'hutzi es kol apar el chutz lamachne el mokom tor el shvach hadeshin v'sarfos ala eitzim ba'esh. By the way, there was also another Beis Hadeshin in the Azorah. But the pasuk says in Vayikra Tezayin, "Es parachatos v'soira chatos asher huvo es domo lechaper b'kodesh yoti el michutz lamachne." So the par chatos and the soir chatos, after the dam has been completed, has to be taken out. The dam, the par, or the soir has to be taken out chutz lamachne, and there they burn it over a fire. Es orosam, v'es besoram, v'es pirsham, v'asorif osam, yechabes begodov, v'rochatz es besoram b'mayim, v'achrechein yovel amachta. All this applies to both the first par and the second, the first seir and the second. And all this is divrei Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Shimon. However, the dissenting view of the Chachomim Omrim ein mitamim begodim, the ein nisraf and Beis Hadeshin ela ha'achron hoil v'gomer bo ha'kapara. In other words, the first par, since they didn't complete the matan domim because it was nishpach domim, that par is now disqualified. It's degraded, so to speak. It no longer has the status of the par and the soir that require sreifa chutz l'gimel machnos, and the kohen, with regard to the first par, is not mitame begod. Why? Because the Torah requires sreifa, and tumas begodim applies only in the gemar kapara. The kohen who completes the kapara, and that's the kohen who brought the second replacement par or soir. How many seirim does the Kohen send to Azazel? And it means, in a case of Nishmach Adam, the Dam Soyer Hapnimi, after the Hazah of the Dam of the Kosh Kadoshim, he brought a second Seir for the Hazos on the Paroches, in the case of Nishmach Adam. Now, it's impossible for him to bring a soir pnimi without hagrola. So now we're going to have to bring a second soir for the hagrola. And we end up with two seirim. Do we send them both out to the Azazel, to the Midbar? Kama seirim mishalech? That's the question that's being asked. Because since he needed a second Sarah Pnimi after Nishmach Adam, he's going to need another. Actually, let me be more precise about it. He's going to actually need now two Seirim for the Hagrola in order to get the Damas Soyer for the Soyer Lashem and replace that one so that he can do the Hazos, because Nishvach Adam. Amalei, Rav Nachman responds to Rava, V'chi Edro Mishalech. He's going to send a whole Eder, of Seirim, and send them all out, And the answer is no. It's Pashut, says Rav Nachman to Rava, that lo is Kiko Akosuv. We don't send the whole herd out of goats to the midbar. Amalo, so Rava says to Rav Nachman, the chi Edro Sorev. Does he have to burn the entire herd? Chutz l'sholosh machnos. He only needs to burn one par and one soyer, but nevertheless, Rabbi Lazar of Shimon hold, and in a case where, as a result of Nishpach Hadam, they had to replace with another par or another soyer. Let's say there were three of them. I mean, it doesn't seem to make any difference. He would have to take them all chutz l'machna, and Bli Neder will get into this a little bit more tomorrow. Me dummy. The Gemara says that Rav Nachman responded to Rav and he said, you're making a comparison to two things that are not really analogous. Why? Because Hassam, with regard to the Sarah Pnimi, Loksiv Oso, it doesn't indicate that you have to burn only one side. And therefore, there may be situations and scenarios in which you have to burn multiple Se'irim. But Hacha, with regard to the Sarah Mishtaleach, Ksiv, the Torah says, L'shalech L'shalach oso lazozal amidbaro. Oso comes to exclude more than one soy. We only have to send out one soy. Okay, then. So I wish you a great Shabbos. Thank you so much.